Welcome back, you guys. I'm EFC. This is Blue Lines TV, and welcome to another Talking Points video after that spectacular, amazing win against Tottenham last night. Now, for today's video, I'll be focusing on 3 points today because I'm really going to go into detail. Now, for the first point, of course, I need to break down to you guys how we beat Spurs and why the 3-4-3 formation was the big key reason as to why we got all 3 points. For the second point, I'll be talking about Willian and how Frank Lampard has revived the player for this season. And to end things, I'll be talking about Mason Mount misunderstood. I'll be talking about his involvement yesterday and why Lampard values him so high for the team. Now, before I get into anything though, if you do like today's video, don't forget to smash the like button. Help me get over 1,500 likes. Now we start with the first talking point, and of course I'm going to break down and discuss how the 3-4-3 helped us win that game against Tottenham. Now this really was a master stroke from Frank Lampard. The execution of the game plan worked flawlessly, and it seems obvious that Mourinho may have never prepared properly for Tottenham to face us in a 3-4-3. So right now, you guys, I'm going to be breaking down tactically how we were able to win the game. And to just let you guys know, I'll be focusing mainly on the first half because the first half was where we effectively won this game. In the second half, Son does get sent off quite early, and the complexion of the game was completely different for the second half. So as I said, we'll focus on the first half. It was the utilization of the wing backs. Both wing backs really stretched the field as wide as they possibly could. And we need to realize that Spurs' team setup was very compact. They were thinking the game was going to be a lot more narrow than it actually was. And because of this, it meant that there was oceans of space in these areas here. And these areas out wide in particular were the areas in which the Spurs players really found a lot of difficulties when it came to who picks up who. And that's effectively because Spurs didn't know who to press. If you look at their front three here, Lucas Moura, Son, they were attacking these areas here because they wanted to stop the passes from the centre backs to the wing backs. From here on then, Kane would then follow Zuma, and then Dele Alli would try to get up as well. It was up to Sissoko and Dyer to mark Kante and cover in that midfield pivot, but as you can see, we constantly had a free man out wide to use as an outlet. I mean, look at the passing options that our defenders have, you know, with the two guys in the pivot who kept their shape and their discipline. Spurs just didn't have enough players to help cope with that. And this meant that the wing-backs always had areas of the field in which they were completely unmarked, and we were constantly able to find them as our free man. But anyway, to continue on, this was only the first part to the magic. Massive credit goes to both Willian and Mason Mount, who were constantly able to find intelligent positions in behind Spurs' midfield lines, and this was finding areas in between the lines, and of course areas out wide in the half spaces. Both Willian and Mason Mount were constantly interchanging in the final third, finding areas here, finding areas close to Tammy, around him, and this made it very, very difficult for the Spurs midfield to cope. They were completely outmanned in these areas, and our two attacking mids were constantly able to stretch Spurs in their defensive shape. For example, let's say Mount's down the left channel here. Dyer, of course, is going to go a bit tight to him. And of course, the whole Spurs team that was set up in a very compact shape is naturally going to follow as well. But what happens is, once Willian goes here, Vertonghen obviously follows the man as well, is that there's space out wide on the far right. And as we saw time and time again, Azpilicueta was used as that outlet on the opposite side of the flank every single time to really stretch Spurs and their poor defensive line. Now, to give you guys some more examples, Aurier was really criticised a lot in that game, and I was a bit surprised by that. Aurier was basically left to rot down that right hand side, and it was quite easy because we were able to bypass Spurs' first phase of their press, meaning that of course we took out the rest of the front three and the midfield as well. And by doing this, well, it meant that Aurier had no protection out wide because Lucas Moura never came back to follow the wingbacks. And it was the same thing for Son down the opposite flank. And it was quite simple how we were easily able to do this, and it was the use of how we played in the half spaces here. So for example, I'm going to use Mason Mount again. If he moves to the left channel here, what this does is it pins Aurier. It forces him in this area because he has no outside protection for Moura, who's caught too high up the field. Of course, Spurs' shape is very compact, so always remember that. And with intelligent positioning, with Tammy Abraham making runs in behind to constantly stretch that Spurs defensive line, with Willian finding intelligent positions in between the lines as well. We could see that Lampard told Kante to move further forward as well, and Cover obviously moving to support the play where the ball is. But anyway, as we can see, once Cover moves more in field and Willian and Tammy do the same thing as well, well, it means that we then go 5v4 against Tottenham. And of course, that's a battle we're definitely winning. We are winning that because it's 5 versus 4, and that's how you create your overloads. And this was why we were able to constantly stretch them even more. And this is why guys like Alonso and Aspie had so much joy throughout this entire game. As to finish this point, you guys, one thing you can definitely notice in Spurs is the gaps between their attack over here. Let me just mark it very quickly here. And obviously the gaps between the rest of the team. The distances were too big. Way too big, way too big. And Spurs' game plan was to try and find the centre-backs to launch, long balls up to the front three. But this wasn't as effective. The distances were too big. And most importantly, our high press was too effective. How many times was Kante, Mason, Willian, winning the ball off the centre-backs, winning the second balls, and how many times did the Spurs players like your Dyers and your Sissokos just easily give possession away in their own half? It happened time and time again, and this, you guys, is basically how we won the game versus Tottenham. We played this way because we did not want to play man v man versus Spurs because they are the stronger team. Playing this way stretched the pitch super effectively. All our players had passing options everywhere on the field, meaning that there were solutions to really overcome Spurs anywhere. And a huge part of the success goes to your Willians and your Mason Mounts, because these guys had to take responsibility today. If these guys weren't on point, it would have really affected how the rest of the team, like the wing backs and the midfields and the defence, could push up the field. This was a massive win for Lampard, who is now making a name for himself when it comes to always finding the best tactics for the biggest games. But the use of the wing-back stretching the play made it hard for Spurs players to pick up any man to follow, and this was how we effectively won the game. On this point now, you guys, we move on to the final 2 points. I'll now be talking about Willian, and I'll end things by talking about how Mason Mount is misunderstood. Now, we move on to the second talking point, and of course, we need to talk about a man who's been on unbelievably saucy form this season, and that's Willian. And we have to admit, for this entire season, Willian has been one of our very best players. He's been the go-to guy that Lampard fully has faith in, fully trusts, and fully supports. However, I'm looking on social media and I'm still seeing a lot of comments from people talking about Willian's inconsistencies. And my thing is, how often have you seen these inconsistencies this season? Because stats-wise, Willian is proving to be one of our most, if not the most effective attacking player we have right now. And I think it's about time that we give the player a second chance. If you're playing well, it's very simple. If you're playing well and you're one of our best players, then for me, all this criticism from previous seasons where he's worked under different managers with different tactics, different ideas, different training methods, etc, well, all those things become a bit redundant. I've said on this channel for years that Willian's best position is down that left-hand side. And I say that because we know that Willian's game is about cutting inside with a stronger foot. It's about finding pockets of spaces between the lines to exploit the opposition. It's about those deep aggressions with the ball where, you're carrying the ball from deep areas, pushing further up, creating even more space for your teammates. And we have to be honest, is it really any single surprise that Willian has struggled the past few years under guys like Sarri and even for Conte as well? No. He's been forced to play down the right-hand side where he can't really express himself. He isn't told to move in between the lines to link up with the attacking players. He was kind of playing as just a right winger, whose job was to help link up with Aspie and was to come back to help defend with him and to help support the attack in the final third. And when you play like this, a player like Willian, whose game is a complete contradiction to how you're using him, how can you expect genius? How can you expect super consistency from the player? It's not going to happen. But now that Lampard is here, now that Lampard has brought a very fluid, modern style of attacking football, well, it's really revitalized Willian. Now, Willian's skill set can be used to the very, very maximum. We know that Willian is excellent with his acceleration, his close control, his first touch. He's a powerful runner when he builds that momentum on the ball. He works very hard. And most importantly, His hold-up play in the final thirds. He keeps the ball. He's strong. He's got that low center of gravity and very good upper body strength as well. And now, under Frank Lampard, Willian can combine his skills alongside guys like Mason Mount, alongside your Pulisics, your Tammy Abrahams, you know. In the area between the lines, he has 3 passing options around him. And that's the big difference, to be honest, you guys. Down that right-hand side where you only have support from your fullback and maybe the wide midfield player as well, it's no surprise why things can be a bit static, especially if you're a player that doesn't have a left foot in which to cut inside with. But now that Willian is allowed to move in field and pick the areas and spaces that he wants to attack, this isn't only complementing the other players in the final thirds, but it's allowing Willian to play with maximum confidence. Now, I've been advocating what I'm about to say for so long now. It's always about how you use the players that gets the very best out of them. That's what it comes down to. Imagine you have Robin. If you play him down the left-hand side, you know that you're not going to get anywhere near the same output level in which you play him down the right-hand side. And I don't see why we can't apply that to Willian and other players in a very similar situation. It seems like for the first time for a lot of these players, we have a manager now that's finding a system to get the best out of the players he has, instead of it being the other way round. And all I can say is, Willian, you've been an absolute credit this season. You've been an absolute leader, and long may it continue. Now, to end things with the final talking point, we need to talk about Mason Mount. Mason Mount yesterday, as I said before, was our second best player, and he was key. He was key at pressing the Spurs centre-backs to stop them finding long balls to the forwards and from playing out. His constant non-stop movement between the lines, inside the Spurs defence, outside, between, non-stop. You can't cope against that, especially when you're a player that has that close control and that ability to play in very tight spaces on top of that. My only thing is that as Mason gets older, he needs to make himself much more assertive in the team. I remember Frank Lampard back in the day, if he's making a run inside the box, 9 times out of 10, he's being found. With Mason Mount, most times he does the same thing, he isn't being found, and I think at this point in time, it comes down to Mason not being assertive enough and not being vocal enough. That's not me holding it against the player. He's 20 years old. Of course, there's levels to things. I'm not expecting him to come in at 20 and start running things, but I think that's an area in which he can really grow and improve in. With Mason Mount, we need to understand the role in which Lampard is using him. His major criticism from the fan base tends to be his lack of creativity, but my thing's always been, what do you expect? When you've got the player playing up front alongside Tammy Abraham, how can he create? If you're creating, you're supposed to be deeper, but there's spaces to exploit. Mason Mount is playing up front alongside the striker. And there's a reason why Lampard likes Mason playing in this role, and that's because, number one, he understands that there isn't enough goals in this team, which I think we all know that. We've known that for years now. And number two is that defensive support that he provides. We're a team now where it's very important how we start our press. If players further in front aren't doing their jobs, if they're not in position, if they're not closing people down and they're making life too easy for teams to play out from the back, that's going to affect the entire team. So it's no surprise why players like Mason Mount have such a high standard and value from the manager. Mason Mount has excellent shooting technique, and it's why he suits playing in this shadow striker role in which Lampard is using him. This role suits Mason the most because of the first 2 points I told you guys about, and on top of the fact that he can combine his playmaking abilities alongside a more striker style of role. As I'm really stressing, Mason Mount's job is to be inside the opposition box, and it's down to his teammates to find him in those areas. Of course, if the opportunity does arise, Mason does have the quality and the ability to use his creativity and to play the passes. He's had a history of doing that. Just go on YouTube and look at the highlight clips. But we need to understand and respect that Lampard wants to use the player a bit differently this season to make up for some aspects that we lack in the team. In yesterday's game, Mason Mount had how many shots on goal, but he only played 1 key pass. And last night, Willian had 5 key passes and didn't have as many shots on goal. That's how things work in the system. That's what Lampard wants. I'm sure that all of us have at least played Football Manager once in our lives. We understand the different roles players have, whether you use them in attacking roles, or support roles, or defensive roles, or cover roles. We know how this stuff goes. these same principles apply in real life football. Last night, Mason Mount did an absolute mazzer against Tottenham in a must-win massive game, a game with such high pressure, and he played so well that N'Golo Kante, someone that doesn't really speak as much or even speak about players as much, came out in praise of Mason Mount, saying that he feels like he could be the one youth player that could be better than all the rest. And when Kante listed off all the components and attributes for why he likes Mason Mount so much, well, these are things that we can't dismiss, and these are things we can't ignore. In real life football, it's not always about the 5-star skills and the 4-star skills and a little bit of flair. It's way more than that. There's a reason why you don't see 5-a-side players really transitioning into like professional football. I think it's time we understand what Mount's really about, what Lampard wants from the player, and how Mount benefits the team. You guys, on that note, I'm going to wrap things up and keep things moving. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe. I'm EFC, this is Blue Irons CV. I'll see you guys in a bit.